Well, hello and welcome to this week's A Photographic Life. I want to deal with a few subjects this week which kind of all interconnect. The first one, I suppose, is quite contentious when it comes to photography. It's making money. The second one also seems to be quite contentious. It's about specialising. And the third one may even provide contention on contention. It's about the selling of photographic prints through companies that exist online. Okay, so where shall we start? Well, I think we have to start with expectation. What is your expectation of photography? Are you doing it as an enthusiast because you enjoy it and you have absolutely no intention whatsoever of making any money from it? Or are you somebody who wants to be a professional working photographer? Or are you somebody who's an enthusiast, but it would be quite nice to make a little bit of money on the side? So first of all, if you're going to make money from photography, if that is possible, and I do believe it is. I wrote an article recently dealing with this subject at UnitedNationsOfPhotography.com. So you can look into that if you'd like a little bit more insight into my take on how to make money from photography. But we're going to deal with the basics here first. So, specialization is the key to making money from photography. And what I mean by that is not looking for a niche or creating a brand or making pictures that sell. I mean finding subject matter. If we're a musician or if we're an artist, we can sit down at any time and make something up. We can doodle away or noodle away in our rooms to our heart's content. We can record it. We can add some drums or some guitar or whatever you wish. You can even put it out. You can release it. You can be a one-man band. As an artist, you can do the same thing. You can sit in your studio and you can make work and then you can release it onto the world, however you wish. Now, with both of those, you might make some money and you might not. But you can create whatever you want. Now, here's the problem with photography. Photography requires subject matter. You've got to get out there and find it. So, how do you choose your subject matter? Well, it's got to be on passions, it's got to be on interest, it's got to be on inquisitiveness, and it's got to be on that idea of telling stories visually about things that you find interesting. Now, if you want to make money from that work, you need to identify the people who commission that work. They're not going to commission you just because they like your pictures. They're going to commission you because they think that you can solve a problem for them, a visual problem. Therefore, you have to specialize because you'll never be commissioned to take a photograph you've never taken before. They're going to see something you've done and think, yeah, I'd like something like that. Now, I quite often see and hear photographers saying, don't gatekeep, don't put these rules down. I'm going to make photographs about whatever I want. And of course you can, and that's absolutely fine. But don't expect to make money from that photography if you do that. The reason is because nobody's going to commission you to make work if you're just going to go off and do whatever you want. People who commission photography are looking for specialists. Not just specialists as photographers, there are loads of those, but specialists on the subject, outside of photography. And that's how you can make money from photography. You have to be a specialist in your subject. Now, depending on what that subject is, will dictate how much money. Because, to be honest with you, some areas pay really well. Other areas don't pay anything at all. That's part of your research to find that out. Now, if we follow that on to a sort of logical conclusion, if we want to make money occasionally, and we're not going to specialise and we're not going to work with professional people who commission photography, then what we're really going to try and do, I suppose, is sell prints. And I've seen that there is a online software company that deals with this for you. I suppose you could call it an online gallery of some kind. And it's called Picfair, Picfair. Now, I'd love to tell you a lot more about it. I went to their website and I did. I clicked on the links that said find out more. And each time they wouldn't allow me to find out anything more unless I registered with them and gave them all my details. Therefore, all I know is it's Picfair. They say they're going to sell your pictures, and I think they maybe also print them as well. I don't know. I couldn't find out anything about them. But here's the snake oil of that. People are only going to buy your prints if they want to put them on the wall, if they connect with the work that you're making. They connect with the subject matter, primarily. There's only so many soft-focused landscapes, pictures of birds, flowers, street photography that anybody wants on their wall. I wonder how many of those kinds of pictures by other photographers you have on your wall. Do you go to the trouble of buying them and then framing them? Or do you just think, yeah, I like that, I'll go and take my own. I'll do my own work. So the idea of selling this work, for me, is a little bit of fool's gold. They're promising alchemy, the turning of green into precious metals, base metals into precious metals. I said green there because that's a reference to an old play by Ben Jonson of The Alchemist. I shouldn't really have gone back that far. But that idea of base metal into gold goes back to Shakespeare, and it was as ridiculous then as it is now. The reality of making money from photography is quite clear. You need to get commissioned, you need to specialise, and you need to play by the rules. Anything else is just hope. Now, to a lot of you, the idea of commissioned photography might be an anathema. I'm an artist. I don't do commissioned photography. I don't do what other people tell me. What I do is I create work, and it's true to me, and I show the world how I see it. Well, I've told a story about the photography of William Klein a few times in the past, but I think it's relevant to this conversation. So let me take you back to 1991. I'm the art director of Tatler magazine in London, and I've got some people I need photographed. The Canadian experimental dance troupe La 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 Human Steps. They're in Paris, and I need a photographer in Paris to photograph them. Now, at that time, there are a number of the so-called, or the greats of photography, the icons of photography, who weren't getting commissioned, who weren't getting any work. In that, I can include Don McCullum, Jean-Luc Sieff. I remember commissioning Leonard Freed for a magazine, for a fashion magazine. In fact, I commissioned Jean-Luc and also a number of times, and actually helped him restart his career with the infamous Haagen-Dazs campaign that he got on the back of photographing the model Elle Macpherson naked for me, just covered in diamonds. Anyway, we're going off at a tangent. So, La 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 Human Steps in Paris, 1991, for Tatler magazine, a straightforward editorial commission. I thought, what about William Klein? Well, I got his number from Robin Muir, who was the photo editor on Vogue at the time, because, of course, this was all we could do. All we could do was phone people up. So he said, well, you can phone him, but he might be a bit difficult. So I thought, well, I'll give it a go. Anyway, so I rang him, and he answered the phone. Of course, at this time, I can't remember if answer machines were happening. I don't think everyone had one. Anyway, he answered the phone. I explained who I was, and I explained what I wanted to do. And I asked whether he would be so happy as to photograph them for me. I said he could have complete freedom and photograph them however he wished. He said, well, I'm not doing any photography at the minute. I haven't done any for a while. I've been making a lot of films. So yeah, that sounds like fun. So off he went, and he photographed them. Now, there was no brief from me as to what to do. There was no art director involved on the shoot, no hair and makeup, nothing. Just William Klein and the dancers. A few days later, I rang him up to ask how it went. He said, well, it went okay, but I got arrested by the police because I had them dancing around the inside of a Paris metro carriage. They were throwing themselves around, the physical dancers, and we got arrested. So I was a little bit concerned, but I said, well, okay, but how are the photographs? And he said, yep, I'm pleased with them. I'll send them over. And he did. He sent me a series of prints, black and white prints, quite large prints, actually. I can't remember exactly what size format they were, but they're quite large prints, and he gave me a choice to choose from. On the basis of that, I then commissioned William Klein on a few occasions, and we actually became quite good friends. Now, let's fast forward, shall we, to 2025. Since that commission for Tatler magazine, those pictures appeared in his book, In Fashion, which was a collection of work, I think primarily just fashion-based, really. And these weren't really fashion, but he obviously wanted, as they were recent pictures, and he hadn't done a lot of recent pictures, he wanted them included in that book. So you can have a look at In Fashion, and they're towards the end of the book. If we come right the way forward to 2025, those prints are now for sale in a number of galleries around the world. Now, Klein kept his copyright. I always made sure that photographers who worked for me did. I never stole their copyright for that kind of work. So you can now buy those prints at top galleries, including, I think, Howard Greenberg in New York, for very, very large amounts of money in limited edition sets. There is no mention in the information about those pictures that I've ever seen that they were commissioned by me for Tatler magazine. I think Klein perhaps decided not to include that information. But it's true that a commissioned body of work appeared in a book and then became art prints. Were they art at the beginning? Klein would definitely say no. I think I would agree with him. In previous episodes, I found time to share with you some of the readers' letters that I get in. Readers, I keep doing that. That's years of working in magazines. I meant listeners. You know that, don't you? Anyway, I don't know if any of you remember a band from, I think, 1980s, the Three Johns. Well, this week we've got two Johns. We've had two letters from two separate Johns. That's their name, by the way. It's not some kind of American slang for using that term. Anyway, the first one says this: Dear Grant, your comments are always thought-provoking. As one of the older generation, I have learned to embrace not only digital photography for the last 20 years, but also autofocus. 2 years of part-time teaching O and A-level photography to 16-year-olds in the late noughties probably does not qualify to judge what direction photography is going in today. But the easier an occupation gets via the hardware, the more people are attracted to it. But surely there is still the raw material out there who are worthwhile teaching. The teaching of photography 50 years ago was all about using equipment and materials to their best and I suppose best advantage, and to produce work to a high professional and commercial standard. I would also respect teachers who could help me do that. It was what I needed to be a full-time professional. You can't teach enthusiasm, but you can foster and encourage it. Another great podcast from you. Thank you, Best John. That was obviously a response there to the conversation that Bill Shapiro and I had concerning teaching of photography. So the second John sent a message to me. Hello, Grant. Just a quick note to say thank you for sharing the reference to George Lewinsky in a recent episode. I managed to pick up an ex-library copy of his book, Portrait of the Artist, very reasonably online. Have to say, I do really recommend that book, and you can get it very cheaply. So do look out for it. It was fortunate timing, as I'm starting a new project speaking to and photographing local artists who belong to a local collective. I'm primarily interested in the benefits of creative pursuits at whatever level on people's quality of life as we age. My other job involves working with older people who are often socially isolated, and I feel these stories might be of benefit in encouraging people to revisit forgotten interests and hobbies. I think in the same episode, you also raised the question of whether there are any photographers who might primarily work with artists. One who comes to mind is Alan Cullender, who you are probably aware of anyway, and which I was. If you are still adding names, by the way, to the Photographer's Archive, I've recently been looking at the work of William Albert Allard, born 1937. In the intro to a section of a book I am reading, he writes the following, which to me sounds like a good way to consider a project before starting. Allard said this: "In college, I had tried to force myself to select story subjects. I might not be totally successful in completing stories that required me to gain the acceptance of my subjects. In order to work an interracial marriage and a high-intensity black church congregation, for example. They challenged me psychologically, because if you want to photograph people intimately, you must first gain their permission. All the best, John." Well, I completely agree with that sentiment, I have to say. So thank you very much for the two Johns. I do get a lot of messages and feedback and stuff coming into me, and I try and edit it down as much as I can. A lot of it does tend to be very long. I will say that both of those I had to edit down. It's great. You kind of seem to use the feedback as a way of putting your own thoughts out, and maybe also thinking things through for yourself, which is great. So if you do feel that you wish to respond to anything I say on any episode, don't forget you can email me through the website, and that's unitednationsofphotography.com. You can get me at UN of Photo on Threads and UN of Photo on Blue Sky also. So lots of opportunity there to get in touch with me. I have had a few more PRs get in touch with me, telling me why I should feature people they're representing on the podcast. Once again, slightly deaf-eared, because it's very obvious that they don't listen on to the podcast. So my usual warning to anybody paying a PR to either represent them or try and get them some media coverage is be very careful who you work with, because you'll be paying them and they won't necessarily be representing you in the best way or in the way in which you wish to be represented. Anyway, just finally, big thank you to everybody who came at the weekend to our first podcast live, Life-390, at Oxford Brookes University. Fantastic turnout. Thank you so much for that. Really great conversation. Lovely to see so many of you listeners there in the flesh. And big thank you to our contributors, Alice Tomlinson, Chris Floyd and Michael Pritchard, who I think really instigated a lot of discussion and a lot of thought. Some of you have been asking me already as to whether or not there's going to be another one. Well, I think I'm going to have to recover from this one first. And of course, over the coming week, I'm going to take care. Sure you will too.